you offered the definition of a free thinker, I think according to like Webster's dictionary in your book, which is one who thinks freely or independently, one who forms opinions on the basis of reason independently of authority. And, as I learn more and more about Spinoza, I now understand that was a guiding light in his life, was to be a free thinker. And I understand that he, very courageously and boldly spoke out against the Jewish religion into which he was born and the claims of the Bible. And the Bible in that time period, and still today in many places, is considered an authority, a divine authority for that matter. And then you have the chapter in your book, I think it was called Two Bibles. So can you tell us, what would Spinoza have said about the commonalities between the Bible, the religious Bible, and the DSM?
Well, he would have said, for example, what he said, well, to start with what we know what he said about the Bible, okay, in this, what we're talking about, the theological political treatise, which he wrote in 1670, which was 7 years before he died, and made him a pariah, made him a heretic, made him actually an object of surveillance, got him in deep trouble. Let's just put it that way. And what he said was that, look, this Bible is a work of people, men, okay? It's not the word of God. And he used terms like that were really strong in that era, calling it faulty, mutilated, adulterated, inconsistent, pretty radical terminology for the Bible in the 1600s. And the reason why he did this was that it wasn't like he was anti-Bible or anti-religion. In fact, he was hopeful. He believed that, for the non-philosophical, the non-rational, if they got the message from the Bible, which of one of justice and charity, which is not the only message of the Bible, unfortunately, but it's part of the message of the Bible. He was all for that. He believed in justice and charity, and if that's how if people got it from the Bible, great. But it wasn't a philosophical, scientific piece of literature. It was a moral narrative written by people for a bunch of political reasons. And what his concern was for his buddies and himself, they were free thinkers, that if you believed that the Bible was the word of God, okay, and then the people who were setting themselves up in that society as the best interpreters of the Bible were the clergy, the ecclesiastic authorities, then you see how the game works. They were going to have the most power, and they were going to have the most power to shut up people like Spinoza and his buddies. And what he cared most about was freedom of speech, freedom of the ability to express yourself, freedom to be who you are. And he cared a lot about having freedom from these ecclesiastic authorities, these monarchs, and, freedom from all kinds of places. We can get to more of the more interesting aspects of what he cared about in terms of freedom. But so when you bring that to the Bible, and so we know what Spinoza, how he felt about the Bible. And when you get to the DSM, which is ironically, it was kind of fun for me, because to write that chapter, the Two Bibles, was kind of fun because we call the DSM, inside and outside of psychiatry, psychiatry's Bible. And so it's not too difficult to guess what Spinoza would have thought about the DSM. He would have said, like, well, at least psychiatry is not saying it's the word of God. They're at least admitting it's the work of people. And he would feel sorry for these psychiatrists who would try to, view themselves as scientific, because clearly, as I was saying before, these are just notions based on opinion, no different than these clergy's notions of what's sin and what's not sin, and what you're going to go to hell for and what you're going to go to heaven. So he would see that. He would see it as a moral narrative. He would also see, he was Spinoza was an interesting guy, because not only was a traditional philosopher in terms of caring about metaphysics, epistemology, but he cared about psychology. He also cared about politics and religion. And so he would immediately see the power game of, like, once again, we have a situation where some professional class, not clergy, but these psychiatrists and these mental health professionals who are declaring themselves the superior people to interpret this scientific instrument. And so nowadays, what has more authority is science rather than divinity. And so if you can set yourself up as scientific authority, when we know the Bible is pseudoscience, I mean, the DSM is pseudoscience, then you see how that game works. And so that would be important for a guy like Spinoza, if you see the parallel, is to show that the DSM was pseudoscientific, to strip their professional interpreters of the power that they have over other people. So I think I feel pretty safe in saying that this would be a pretty clear kind of thing that would happen for a guy like Spinoza and his friends, some of whom were even more bold and outrageous radical free thinkers and got themselves thrown in prison. Spinoza sort of lucked out, in a lot of ways. They didn't get thrown in prison, didn't get assassinated, but some of his friends were not so lucky. And so that's what would clearly be the case, that anything where somebody was imposing their opinion as truth and using that to oppress other people would be abhorrent to Spinoza and his buddies.
Mm.